Aloha and hello. Welcome to Holy Matrimony. I'm James Fenimore. That's at James Fenimore _.
And I'm Trisha Fenimore. That's at Trisha Fenimore. You can find the show at Holy Matrimony __.
Today we're brought to you by Sex Ed Reclaimed. Have you ever wondered how to talk to your kids about sex but don't quite have the words? Sex Ed Reclaimed has you covered with age-appropriate content made just for your family. Get curriculum that covers all the hard topics from a faith-based worldview. Krista Miele has educated tens of thousands of students in multiple countries to encourage organic conversations within families about a gift God created. This education was made for such a time as this, so find your curriculum today at sexedreclaimed.com. All right, today we're talking Friends.
Yes.
Not the show.
No, we're not going to be talking about that show.
No, we're talking Friends.
How did they afford the rent? How?
I actually read a meme about that. They address it in the first episode. It's a rent control department. So
okay.
We're all idiots. We keep bringing it up, so we're all the idiots.
All right. Well, there you go. I had a roommate once who was obsessed with that show. I think people in Germany are obsessed with that show.
Are we talking Friends today?
No.
With the show? I mean, we could keep going. You know, Joey's Italian, likes to eat food. Like, that's my guy. Are we done?
Okay. All right. We're talking friendships. That needed to be clarified. I'm so angry you didn't clarify that for the audience.
Sorry.
Friendships.
Friendships. And I think the best place to start is what's appropriate when when you have friends when you're married.
Okay. All right. So my ultimate test is, do they help your marriage or do they hurt your marriage? And I think there's a lot of different directions this can go. Like, are you friends with somebody who constantly complains about their spouse, who, then pokes holes in your spouse and like, you see, all men are the same, or all women, I'll tell you,
Well, is that appropriate or is that preference? I think first let's talk appropriate.
Okay.
So we had a show on emotional infidelity.
Right.
That is not what we're talking about today.
No.
So if there's an emotional infidelity, that's not a friend.
Where the door might be open to something more, like an affair.
That's not a friend.
That's not a friend.
That's an interest. That's a person. That's
That's something else.
Something else. So that, right off the bat, not appropriate.
Okay.
That's not a friend. That's
of
not
course
appropriate.
Not. Right.
Okay.
Is it appropriate to have friends of the opposite sex? Go.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
In what context?
Again, let's reverse back to the emotional infidelity. No.
Yeah.
But yes, I think it's absolutely appropriate. I mean, when we got together, I have friends that are girls.
Yes.
Some of them were girls at the time because we were basically young.
You don't have friends who are girls. You have friends who are women.
They're women now. I'm a man now. We're all adults. We're pretending to be.
Isn't that what we all do?
But yes, having women or men friends of the opposite sex is appropriate. For this instance, it was easy.
Yeah.
Because they were lifelong friends.
So for me, coming into our relationship, I didn't even think it was appropriate to have friends of the opposite sex. Like, I didn't think that was appropriate. I didn't think it was possible. I thought one would always, I had all these preconceived notions. And when we started dating and I learned that he had all these female friendships, I was none too pleased. And so, of course, I tried to do something about that. And I said, you got to get rid of them. And he was very sweet because in the past, if I were to tell somebody, you got to get rid of this female friend, I would hear, okay. And when I said that to him, he just kind of laughed gently.
Wrong.
Tap the mic. Wrong. No, he very lovingly, actually, and very patiently described it to me. And he goes, Trisha, I care about you a lot. I'm really interested in you. We have just met, a few months in, and I do really like you. I'm really into this relationship. I have had these friends for over 20 years at this point. And he goes, what kind of man would I be if I just threw out these friendships because somebody came into my life and told me to a few months in? And he said, I really am into you and I want to make this work. I'm willing to work with you on this and meet you halfway and do my part in helping you adjust to this. But like, I need you to understand the context of these friendships. And now, I mean, they're more my friends than yours.
I actually did lose friends because they're your friends. They'll side with you. They talk to you.
That's true.
Look, it also makes sense. You guys are women and I'm a man, but I think also that's a great litmus test, right? I mean, these are people that have been friends with me for my whole life, from teenager or like early college, which is teenager. And they've stuck with me through the years, which, by the way, credit to them, because I don't know what they're thinking. That's their flaw. They stuck around that long. But obviously, there's a commonality there. I love you, you love me, so there's a commonality here. So it's very a natural enmeshment for you to become really close with them or really good friends with them or just friendly with them. So it would be weird if like I had a friend that was a girl since I was like 17 or 20 and like you guys dislike each other.
Yeah, that would be
strange.
A
totally different vibe.
And I think what's appropriate is like, you never were romantically involved with any of these women. Like if you had some 5-year relationship, I wouldn't deem that appropriate. Would you?
No. And also, obviously, context matters here. If we were like 14 or 15 and we went on like, to a dance together, like.
Well, I'm saying a long term.
If we were like in college dating for 3 years.
I don't know if I think exes can be friends. I don't think that you can. Once that's been introduced on an adult level, I don't think it can be unintroduced. That's just my opinion at where I'm at today. Maybe people will weigh in the comments.
Yes, and that is personal, and I tend to agree.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to tell people how to live their life because there are unique situations where like, hey, we dated in college, we reconnected when we were 30,
or we reconnected when we were 55, and all right.
There's different strokes for different folks. Here's the thing. You're watching this podcast for a reason. Look in here. Ask yourself why you're friends with them.
Yeah. Is there maybe a hope?
If this is a pure answer, and you also believe it's a pure answer for them as well, God bless.
Because that's part of it too, is even if you're not attracted to a friend of the opposite sex, do you enjoy the doting attention that they might give to you because they're interested? And then that heart is not so pure.
Well, I was going the opposite way. Even if it's not enjoying doting attention, even if you genuinely believe that it's a friendship, when you really ask yourself, do they also believe that? Because that's different, right? But look,
that's true.
That is different. But either way, so if there's any shred of that, maybe
then I don't think it's appropriate.
Something you need to look into.
Yeah.
But again, we're not privy to people's individual situations, so I'm not going to tell you to just like throw away a friendship. But just look in here, look in your heart, really understand what the purpose of this friendship is.
What happens if your spouse hates your friend? Like if your spouse really has a problem with one of your friends, what do you do?
Well, there's a few things. Why do they hate them, right? Instead of hate, why do they strongly dislike them? If it's because they think they're a bad influence on you, that's one thing. If it's because they just don't like them because they just don't jive with them, that's another thing.
Yeah.
And from there is where I think you have to then take your action. Because if it's just a conflict of personalities, especially if it's an opposite sex friend, like, because there are always going to be people that like a woman is a little friendlier with her, a guy just doesn't get what the appeal is, and vice versa. Or maybe listen, as you grow, some people stay in age groups a little longer. So like, when we met, I was 35. And so were most of my friends. Maybe one of them acted like he was 25 at the time and that annoyed you. Totally understandable. Maybe me and my other guy friends.
I was closer to 25.
That's true.
But I was a wise 20-something-year-old.
Yeah, you're still that wise. But so the reasoning behind the dislike, I think, is important. I think they're a really poor influence on you and you don't like the person that your spouse becomes when they're with them. That's a conversation that needs to take place.
Is it a friend who dishonors their spouse? Because that is something I would have a problem with, just hypothetically.
Yes.
Like if that I think that, we are who we hang out with. Iron sharpens iron. You run with fools, you're going to become a fool, And so I think there is some measure of legitimacy there. If someone were to come and say, like, this friend that my husband has is a real dog, when his wife's not around, he makes all these comments about women, and I think, this and that and all these things. And it's like, that might need to, maybe that is a conversation where it's like, if he's not honoring his marriage, he's certainly not going to help your husband honor yours.
Yes, I do think at a certain point, while this conversation is happening, and if you're creating boundaries around that person, I think that's appropriate. But I also think there needs to be some grace there too, because if it's a group of 10 friends that have been around,
that's true.
Now your husband or wife can't go out with this group of friends or to a wedding or to an
it's more like
thing.
They can't go on a weekend trip with that one friend and just him.
That's what I mean on the boundaries,
right?
Like if it's you, him, or you and her and one other person, like I'd rather you maybe not go there. If it's just a quick bite to eat, all right, fine. But it's a weekend trip, it's a spa weekend, it's a golf weekend, whatever it is, maybe not.
This, I think, goes into a conversation more about our inner circle and as the circle gets wider. And obviously, as the circle gets wider, there's going to be different personality types, different life circumstances. But when we go to that inner circle, who we want in there as friends are people who fortify the marriage. I've talked about this all the time. My best girlfriends, when I call them and I'm like, oh, Jimmy and I got in a disagreement again. Or not again, but like we got in a disagreement. And again, they will say the same thing that again, they say every time, which is like, are you out of your mind? He is an amazing man. Like, you are so lucky. Do you know the type of men that are out there? And
No. Keep going. Keep going. Don't stop. Don't stop.
They fortify the relationship, bringing me back to the perspective that it's not me against him. It's our marriage against forces trying to disrupt our marriage. And that is a really good perspective that I personally prioritize in my inner circle, is if you're going to try to like pit me against him, you're out.
Especially when bringing in new friends.
Of course.
Like you have legacy friends that, there's honor there, there's loyalty there.
Although there should be no more.
More, of course, of course.
Only to God more.
And and you use the words appropriately to bring them in your inner circle. They might have to become periphery friends.
Yes.
But I've joked with you about it. There are people that you've never met before that if they called me tomorrow and needed something, I would answer the toll. Like, because they were so close to me in high school or college.
Right.
Like, I would be there for them. And you haven't even met them because we're just grew apart. But when you say inner circle and bring people in the inner circle, it's easy to take one of those friendships from the past that might not benefit this relationship and just kind of, you don't have to delete them, but you push them away. You don't bring them in your inner circle. Now, when we're married and we start meeting new people, now it's a great litmus test to say, okay, who are we inviting into our life?
Well, I have a reference point. So, how long were we married? We had a baby. We had just had a baby recently, And
probably a year and a half.
If that. And because, anyway, so I struck up a friendship with a single mom who I had met, and there's nothing, I enjoyed her. She was very smart. She was very engaging. And so we kind of hit it off, and we would take the kids here and there, like to a couple different places. But as the friendship progressed, she had no interest in meeting you or talking about you or hearing stories about him. And like, look, like this is my family is the main part of my life. And so it became very uncomfortable for me to the point that I exited that friendship when I started noticing it. And then I was like, nah, that can't possibly be it. But then it was like more and more, it just seemed like the conversations would get shut down when I would bring him up.
Well, somebody even suggested to you, like, not the best idea to invite single people into your friendships.
Well, and that introduced a conversation that we had even back then, which like there was an older person in my life who had said, like, you shouldn't be friends with single women as a married woman. And I don't agree with that because I have friendships with women who are still single from like back when I was still single. But it did introduce like if the priorities and the values are not the same, then that, and this person did not share the faith that I do, like, and so there was not like a core foundation, there was a lot going against the commonalities in that friendship. And so it was a very short-lived friendship. I mean, I want to say only a couple weeks or a few weeks, but it was like,
I think you should tell the thing that really like iced it.
Oh, you can tell.
So Trisha comes home from like going out to dinner with this person. She was, yeah. So
with the kids.
With the kids. She was, so-and-so mentioned wanting to go on a ski weekend with the kids. And I was like, oh, that's great. Because first of all, out of everybody involved in this process, I am the skier.
He's a really good skier.
I grew up skiing. I'm a skier. So I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, no. I was like, I think I'd like to meet this person first.
Before we go away for
like a weekend and get a cabin together or something. And she goes, oh, no. Just her and I and the kids. And I go, so let me get this straight. This person I've never met before is going to put my kid on skis and watch him ski before I do? No. And that's when we realized, okay, she clearly has some issues with couples.
Well, there were a few instances where the more I unpacked it, the more I realized like there were some issues with men that like we won't go into detail. It
doesn't even matter the issues about men. She just had no desire to meet this major part of your life and involve them. So it was like but here's the thing, this was very obvious, and very black and white. Other things are not going to be so much. So back what we were talking about earlier when we were like single friends, you're like, obviously I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to like cut off. That goes back to those legacy friends. No, of course not. We're all different stages of our life. These are people we grew up with, we learned from, we've loved. We're not going to just cut them off. But when we're seeking new friendships, to your next point that you made, you want to find people with similar values, similar, likes, dislikes.
And I would say only similar lifestyles because it makes planning and everything easier.
Like
I'm
not even talking
lifestyle.
Points. I'm just talking, values. And
like,
listen, if you meet somebody at church and they're amazing and they're single, it's like,
of course,
if they have the same values of family and want to. Yeah, go for it.
Right.
So lifestyle makes it easier because like you don't need to explain to them like I got
the kid got sick,
two kids.
We got to bail.
Yeah,
they get that if they have kids.
But values is important, and this friendship that we were just discussing were clearly not the same values. There was no value in this.
Right.
So if the person you're becoming friends with once you're married, really before you're married too, but that's a different story for another day, values a marriage and wants that and wants to see that. Maybe they're attracted to you because of this and they see this attractive lifestyle, so they want to be friends with you. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Don't neglect it. Don't just, throw that away because they're single. But if they're, wanting to go out partying 3 nights a week while you have 2 kids, that's a problem.
Well, and I would say I didn't always have that attitude of discernment with the sharing of values because it was like I always wanted to be open-minded. I always wanted to give everybody a fair shot. And what I've learned over the years is it's lovely to be open-minded to a certain extent. It's lovely to give everyone a fair shot, but not everyone gets a shot at the inner circle. And now I feel like I'm like in a WWE, like I feel like I should grab this mic and be like, not everyone gets a shot at the inner circle. I don't know why that comes to mind in this moment. But it does. And not everyone gets a shot at the inner circle. You can give people a fair shot to be invited to a Bible study, to be invited out to a group dinner, but you don't go away on a ski trip with somebody who does not value your marriage the way that it should be valued. And that's up to us to determine that, and that's up to us to uphold that. That's not their responsibility. It's our responsibility to maintain the inner circle of only people who uphold that. To when we call somebody and say, like, I feel frustrated, I feel this and that, to have those friends be like, you have a beautiful, faith-filled marriage. This is a tough moment. You don't have a tough marriage, presuming that they know what's going on, and that you don't. And it's like to bring us back to the union of marriage. Really, everything in our lives should be in support of the marriage because there's enough in the world that sure isn't.
Yeah. I mean, we see these caricatures of people on TV, the men specifically, complaining about their wives, complaining about all the things they need to do for their kids. Do I think that's a real thing? I don't see it nearly as much in real life, but I've also curated the people I'm around. So for my men out there, like, that's just going to sow poison into your soul.
Yeah.
You want to be around people that love their spouse, that love their family. Listen, they might end up having problems, marital problems, but what the marital problems are is also important. Was it just a guy complaining and not doing anything, or did it end up just being like, hey, we're just having problems? Like, so I'm not saying if they're divorced or on the process of getting divorced, they're not friend material. I'm saying, how do they attack their relationship? How do they approach their relationship? How do they talk about their wife? How do they talk about their family?
How do they talk about their ex, too? Like, what kind of heart posture do they have there? You know, is it venomous and, like, you know, vengeful? Because that's, you know, you
just want to avoid those relationships where it becomes a complaint fest and, oh, well, let me tell you about my wife, the old ball and chain or whatever. Like, it's just not, it's not going to improve this. And this is priority over a friend, over pretty much everything except your relationship with God. So
I'm going to make a Godfather reference if I can, if
Please.
you'll yield your time for a Godfather reference.
Is it going to be the line that I've told you many times, probably in the middle of arguments?
Go
ahead.
No, I don't. I'm not going to misquote it. I was going to have you quote it.
Okay, go ahead.
The real man, like a real man.
Oh yeah, a man that doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man.
Right. So that is a quote from the movie Godfather, a quote that he loves and abides by, like, you know, very much so, to more of an extent than I ever knew possible. And I think that if your friends as men, I'm gonna give some advice to men out there. If you're friends with men who have that mentality, that's gonna give you a different experience of life than if you're friends with men who constantly try to escape their families with every excuse in the book. Well, this one's a golf weekend, and this one's a high school reunion weekend, and this one's if they're constantly trying to escape time with their family, according to The Godfather, those aren't real men.
Just to piggyback that, Godfather 2 has another one I love, which also applies here. It's when they're at the show and he's showing the Don his new woman and asking, don't you think she's so beautiful? She's so beautiful. She's so beautiful. And all he says, hey, if you like her, that's great. I just have eyes for my wife.
Oh, tell me again why I married you.
You know, I always loved that because, you know, you don't need to stick your tongue out and pant like a dog over people, even to be accepted by a friend. You could say, hey, yeah, she's beautiful. If she's for you, then she's beautiful for you. That's wonderful. My wife's beautiful for me. And that's really the way to emulate. This is a movie that murders people. But look at
nobody's perfect.
Look at the gems you can find in anything. If you look for that silver lining, I mean,
that half full mentality.
Yes, absolutely. So anyway, that's I think a great place to stop on friendships. You know, don't covet their wife, but maybe ask him to do a murder. That's a friend. That's a friend. That's a friend.
What a podcast! You never know what you're gonna get on the Holy Matrimony podcast. You really don't.
It's just a great movie. Anyway, I think it's time we answer.
I think it's time we answer the
if
internet.
we're even qualified to do that at this point in time. All right, here we go. Hi guys, my partner and I come from different cultural backgrounds, and sometimes this leads to misunderstandings and arguments. Can you give me some advice on how we can navigate our differences and create a better relationship? I actually really like this question because they don't make mention of the cultural background. So they don't say, I'm Italian, she's German Irish, or, I'm black, they're white, whatever it is. They just leave it vague, which is perfect because I think that will help the most people.
I agree.
So cultural backgrounds can lead to misunderstandings.
It could also be like money. Yeah, like one's really high upper echelon. Like these cultural backgrounds is
I know, but I think they were more talking. Well, yeah, you're right, because they could be coming from like somebody coming from upper class, somebody coming from middle class or lower class.
But I think the first thing to recognize is there is more going against this relationship simply because your frames of reference and your points of reference are going to be different. Whether that's a racial background difference, a financial background difference, whatever it is, you're going to have different points of reference. And I think the key is communication and seeking to understand where the other person is coming from and why certain things are different, and not better or worse, just different. People have different ways of doing things.
Well, I think also having the ears and the heart to hear the other person, because I think of us and, you know, when we used to get in disagreements, there were, and we've actually talked about this before. You would say, like, don't yell, and I'd be like, I'm not yelling. Like, you'll know when I'm yelling. I just get loud and animated because culturally, that's what my people do. But no, we're emotional, we get loud, we get boisterous, but I'm not yelling at you. I'm just getting excited. And, you know, and you even see that when I'm talking about things that I'm happy about, that I'll get excited. So hearing that and believing that, I think, is also important. Like, hearing them out, like, all right, explain to me this part of you, and giving them the grace.
So I remember we had one instance of a cultural difference that arose after a disagreement. So we had a disagreement before going to an event, and we were set to go, and I, you know, put on a smile and was ready to go, because that was culturally like what I was accustomed to doing. Is you have a commitment, you show up with a smile on your face, and you just bury the whatever's going on outside of that. And he looked at me and he goes, I don't want to go to this thing the way that we're at now. He's like, I'm not going to enjoy this. And I was like, who told you this was about enjoying your life? We have to go. We have to put on a brave face, and we got to make it through, white knuckle it. You know, we got to pull the curtains and tighten it up and look good and show up. And it was that moment that I realized that there was a very different way in which we experienced life, and that this was an opportunity to try to understand where we came from. And so while for him it may have been experienced as like me trying to sweep the problem under the rug and just go about normal day life, I think the more he got to know where I was coming from, he understood what that compulsion to, like, okay, well, we just got to show up to this thing, so let's just make do. And then the more I understood him, and he said, Trisha, it's not what it looks like on the outside, it's what it feels like on the inside. And right now, it doesn't feel good. He's like, I'm not going to enjoy this event if we go in the state that we're in. And that really introduced to me a whole different way of experiencing and going through life. And I think that when we come across cultural differences, and that's just a small example, but when we come across that, we need to be humble enough to understand where each other are coming from, and then potentially even be humble enough to lay ours down if we hear something that feels like it's truer for our spirit. Because for me, frankly, to show up with a smile and, you know, all ready, but like feeling gross on the inside, like that spirit of strife on the inside, but looking nice on the outside, it is a form of lying. And I think that the honesty with which you taught me in that moment, like this experiential honesty, was a really formative moment for me.
Yeah, I you know, and again, back to what you said, that not necessarily like a heritage culture, but a culture of how I grew up, or things I saw. Sometimes it's things I saw that I didn't like that I'm trying to change. You know, having been put in that position, you know, before, I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm an adult now. I get to make the rules. I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, that's, I mean, I joke with you often, like, that's why I'm always early, because my whole life I grew up, I was always late. And it was always a frantic to get out of the house, and I hated the way it felt. So I'd rather show up 15 minutes early and sit in my car than ever feel that again.
And then you married me, and then
I show up 7 minutes early, because I lie and tell you what time we need to be there, and it's a half an hour earlier than it's supposed to be.
I'm working on it. I'm a work in progress.
Nah,
as we all are.
You're wonderful. But on leading to misunderstandings and arguments, the when it leads to a misunderstanding is the perfect time to discuss the difference and hear it, respect it, and then work to change, either work to change it or work to change for it.
Yeah.
So the change doesn't only come from the person who has the cultural difference, per se, that this is making this negative. Sometimes it's the other person allowing it and understanding it and coming to it. So instead of telling somebody to just stop doing what they're doing because it doesn't work and we always argue, sometimes it's, all right, you know what? I'm going to learn to accept this difference and I'm going to meet you halfway or maybe even the whole way. Whether it's on birthdays we go crazy and we have to have a major event because that's how I grew up. And the other person's like, well, it really was never that big of a deal. We had a cake and a couple gifts. That was it. We didn't, from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to sleep, it's a rock star party. It's like, well, then maybe if that's really important to your spouse, maybe that's a good example of something that you're going to work towards at least coming 50%, maybe the whole way, and make it a bigger deal than cake and presents. So that, I think, is where use the misunderstandings, use the arguments as learning experiences. Don't just apologize sincerely, because we had that episode, and move on. Learn from it. Talk about it. Say, how can I make this better for you next time this comes up? How can you make it better for me next time it comes up? I think those are very important ways to go about it.
I think that there's so much in our world that tries to operate against love and a true union, like a true holy commitment. There's so much working against us. There's always something working against us. And I don't want anyone to ever feel discouraged that cultural backgrounds should be a deal breaker, because it's not. Like, the fact is, there will always be challenges and friction and valleys that need to be overcome, and can be. But it's like, sometimes I wonder if those are the issues in that relationship. Every relationship has issues. And like, maybe that's just your relationship's issues that need to be worked through and understood better together. But it's certainly not anything to call it quits over. If you guys love each other and have shared values and a shared commitment to God, like, there is nothing too big. And even like when families get involved, go watch our in-laws episode if that's part of the cultural differences. Everything can be, if this is strong, then what can come against it?
Well, I like to close with the cultural differences and how they can be beautiful.
Absolutely.
With a story.
That's a great point.
They're important. I think they're great if you have them. You could use them. So I'm from New York, as you know. I'm Italian, as you also know, especially from the Godfather comments earlier. Trisha's from the Midwest.
I'm 0% Italian.
In the Midwest, they eat meatloaf. They eat a lot of meatloaf.
We do.
I don't. And one of
you had never had meatloaf before.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So one of Trisha's recipes, she makes this meatloaf for me, and it's pretty good. It's not terrible. It's weird. It's different. It looks like a loaf of bread that's meat.
Visually, it's a tough sell for someone who's not familiar with it.
And she made this glaze on it that was phenomenal. I loved it. I was like, okay, this is the best part of it, honestly. I said, well, wait a second. If the glaze is what I love, if we somehow shrink this meatloaf and use more surface area of glaze, this would be really good. Meatballs of her meatloaf. Cultural differences solved. Thank you. I am now available to go to the Middle East.
The meatloaf meatballs, I feel like I should prepare a recipe and provide it. Meatloaf meatballs are a mainstay in our house, and they are loved by all who try them. I've even made them for some of Jimmy's family members who are also Italian, and they've really enjoyed them too. And it's always a fun story, because it's now we have this beautiful bespoke dish in our house of meatloaf meatballs, and the sauce is the glaze, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's an amazing dish that we, that he kind of formulated and that we brought together both of our different cultures. I don't want to take too much credit
here. I just told her to put him in meatballs. She did all the hard heavy lifting. I'm an ideas man. There was zero.
This needs more sauce.
Yeah. The execution was zero on mine, other than fork to mouth.
Delegated.
Yes.
You're a good delegator.
I'm a good delegator.
No, it was it really is, though, such a perfect embodiment of the beauty of shared cultural differences coming together in a beautiful, unique way that makes it a unique experience in our family now.
Yeah.
You know, you come over, I make meatloaf meatballs. This is a custom dish to our family, and you really get an up close look at our relationship with it.
Midwest meets New York. It's beautiful.
It's a wonderful thing.
It's a wonderful thing. So cultural differences can be and should be beautiful as long as you work through these misunderstandings and arguments in a positive way and use them as learning experiences.
Right.
And I think that's a great way to bow it up.
Put that bow on.
This has been Holy Matrimony. I'm James Fenimore. That's at James Fenimore _
And I'm Trisha Fenimore. That's at Trisha Fenimore. You can find the show at Holy Matrimony _ and find us at thefenimores.com.
We'll see you next time.